Hello and welcome to this video on the poem Porphyria's Lover by Robert Browning from the Love and Relationships anthology on the exam board, AQA. Now this is a much longer poem than some of the others, so I won't begin by reading it because obviously that would take quite a lot of time, and I'm sure that you're here because you want to get into that analysis. So we'll just dive sort of straight in. Couple of things to mention in a slightly different order to perhaps I normally do, because I think it's important to establish quite early on. So this is a dramatic monologue, okay? And the reason I begin by saying that is because it's in many ways one of the most important things to include in your writing and your analysis of this poem. That's the form. And what the dramatic monologue does is, firstly, it provides just one speaker. Often they are narrating some kind of story. Now, we know that this is a poem that is essentially about two things: madness and murder. Also, I suppose it's about desire, obsession, jealousy. But really, I think this is a poem about control. Now, if I come back just briefly to the dramatic monologue, one speaker narrating. There is another character, Porphyria, but we don't really hear from her. Or if we do, it is through the words of the speaker. So they control everything. They control the poem. Okay? We don't get to pivot into the mind of Porphyria. Everything is channeled through the speaker. And so I guess in many ways, the form of the poem, the dramatic monologue, reflects the power and control of the speaker. Okay? And when we're talking about form and structure and language, we're always thinking about the ways in which they coalesce, in which they combine together. Okay, so that's on there. Now, the title, Porphyria's Lover, the lover is the speaker. Okay? Porphyria, you will know, is a disease, a blood disease, known to cause hallucinations, and also as a given name, does it imply that the female, the woman in this, is to the speaker that he perceives her to be a disease? We know obviously that he ends up killing her. Of course, we can only enter this poem through the mind of the speaker. So we have to kind of go by what they see and think and feel, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable, even if we know that what is being done is vile and distasteful. So obviously with this poem, you know, if we just think kind of contextually, I guess, a little bit, you know, it's written in the Victorian era. It's in a Victorian poem. You know, the Victorians were very conservative in public, but obviously in private, there was a lot of transgression. And, you know, the belief, you know, in our modern era is that this was as a result of that repression, because conservatism often leads to repression. It was patriarchal in delivery of culture, you know, and women were certainly meant to be these kind of demure, quiet figures. And so obviously this is a poem that explores a more sexually imposing and sexually sort of engaging female, which is obviously a little bit kind of going against the grain. And so in many ways, just to come back, I guess, to these ideas of madness and murder and desire, is Robert Browning sort of pushing back against society? I think that's possibly an interesting way in. Right. So all of that's to say to begin. So the rain set early into night. The sullen wind was soon right awake. We have immediate in these opening lines, the setting being kind of cold and dark. This is a nice opportunity here to talk about pathetic fallacy, imitating, mimicking the thoughts and feelings of the speaker. There's a certain personification of the weather, which is kind of quintessentially Gothic, and obviously the Gothic and the Victorian era kind of walking hand in hand. Now, it's important to note that with a poem this long, it's not necessary to know every single line. If you want to go and learn every line, and off by heart, please, by all means, no one's going to stop you, but it's not a requirement. So we tend to sort of take like the key lines when teaching this. So the opening couple is obviously important. The rain set in early tonight. I like this idea of Porphyria glided in Porphyria, gives her an almost kind of ghostly appearance, and adds to that tone, that feeling of unease. Okay. Here, when she withdraws the dripping cloak and shawl and laid her soiled gloves by, united her hat and let the damp hair fall, and then at last she sat down by my side. All of this here shows the kind of desire of the speaker. Okay. They are quite intimate images. They sort of reflect her beauty. This is a beautiful woman, and the speaker is obsessed with her. We continue. When no voice replied, she put my arm about her waist and made her smooth white shoulder bare. Okay, so you see again lots of physical descriptions. Okay, and particularly the shoulder, being quite a sort of sexualized location, particularly in this context. The yellow hair displayed. And stooping made my cheek lie there and spread all over her yellow hair, murmuring how she loved me. So he brings himself in, the speaker displays a narcissism, okay, and there is a definite sense of like self-adoration here, like he really prides himself as this incredible creature, hence the dramatic monologue, right? Taking full control. As the poem continues, a sudden thought of one so pale, for love of her and all in vain, so she was come through wind and rain. Be sure I looked up at her eyes. Okay, so again, these sort of quite physical descriptions. And what does he see in there? Happy and proud. Okay, so again, that love of the speaker. At last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. Right? He's presenting himself as a god, almost, right? Again, that should probably link back to that idea that we discussed previously, this idea of narcissistic behavior. Made my heart swell the moment she was mine, mine, mine. Here we have that emergence, I guess, of that sense of possession and ownership, linking back to the overarching theme of control. Perfectly pure and good, I found a thing to do. And then we have this kind of I'm going to just sort of single out this section here. Okay. Let's take a little highlighter and just sort of zoom in, because this is, if you were going to learn like one chunk off by heart, it would be this one, wouldn't it? So initially she is mine. Let's bring that in here. Perfectly pure and good. I found a thing to do, and all her hair in one long yellow string. I wound 3 times around her little throat, around and strangled her. No pain she felt she, I am quite sure she felt no pain. Right, so just a few things to pick out there. We've discussed the possessive nature. This pure and good, I guess, reflects her innocence. Okay, but what does he do with this innocence? Well, firstly, he does a thing. Now, the thing is a very ambiguous and almost like meaningless word, right? A thing. It shows a lack of sort of seriousness about what he is about to do. His actions do not feel serious to him. Okay, a thing to do. Again, images that were previously on the in the previous section that I showed you, images that were kind of sexualized, now become corrupted because he's about to turn something that was attractive into something that he will kill her with. The yellow string, okay, again, he's almost like dehumanizing her hair, turning it into a weapon. And then we have this really sort of dark image, her little throat, obviously again showing her vulnerability, and then strangled her. And then we have here this piece of caesura. Now, caesura comes from a Latin phrase meaning to cut. And I always think that this is here, you know, as in he's literally cutting her life. It's very matter of fact. He tries to convince himself here, like he tries to sort of persuade himself that she felt no pain. But did she? Well, how are we to know? We only have his words to come on. Then he starts to play with her, right? He tries to kind of, well, he opens her eyelids, which is obviously quite strange, and laughs, the blue eyes without a stain on it, untied the next tress about her neck, her cheek once more, blushed bright beneath my burning kiss. Now, I mentioned earlier that porphyria as a disease causes hallucinations. Well, could this be a hallucination? You know, how reliable is the speaker? And, you know, the short answer is not very. I propped her head up before. Again, he has that control now over her. Only this time my shoulder bore her head, which droops upon it still, the smiling, rosy little head. Okay, so he presents happiness, but truly it is death, right? So glad it has its utmost will that all it scorned, and once I fled, and as love am gained instead. Porphyria's love, she guessed not how her darling one wish would be heard. Thus we stick together now, and all night long we have not stirred, and God has not yet said a word. So just a final word on the final line, and yet God has not said a word. So we could this would have been, I guess, considered to be blasphemous, okay, because the idea being that the speaker is dictating God's feelings, you know, which is not something really that should be done. But the implication that he's giving is that he got away with it, right? Because if God has not said anything, then it must be fine. Very, very interesting, very dark poem. A final little word then, I guess, on structure. And that's simply to talk about the rhyme scheme, which is very consistent. Kiss before, bore still, head will. Let's go back to the top, actually. So we've got tonight, awake, spiked, lake, break, straight, storm, gate, great, warm, form. So it's going in this sort of very consistent rhyme scheme, right? So we have A, B, A, B, B, always ending in a couplet. And this once again links perfectly back to what we discussed here with the dramatic monologue. It reflects the clear control of the speaker. And that, my friends, is Porphyria's lover.